Good morning. My name is Jansen Wendell. As a member of the Board of Trustees of the Mainline Unitarian Church, I bid you welcome to this morning's worship service. Our worship team includes our guest speaker, Reverend Mary Katherine Morn. Ms. Ms. Morn was appointed President and CEO of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, UUSC, in May of 2018. She previously served as the Director of Stewardship and Development and Special Assistant to the President for the Unitarian Universalist Association. Also with us this morning are Carolyn Bright, Ministerial Intern, Emma Mellon, Worship Associate, Dr. Vincent Craig, Music Director, and our MLUC Choir. If you're visiting us for the first time, I especially welcome you. Greetings to those of you joining us online. I encourage you to explore our website to find out more about us. Please reach out to us so that we may connect with you. If you're here in person, please join us in the fireside room across the hall after the service so we may greet you. Do we have any visitors here today? I see one hand. Welcome. As Unitarian Universalists, we draw spiritual inspiration from many sources. These include sacred texts from the world's great religions, words and deeds from prophetic women and men, our direct experience of the sacred in our lives, and the rhythms and cycles of nature and the earth. I have a few announcements I want to highlight. The nominating committee asks you to continue to submit recommendations through December 4th for Board of Trustees and nominating committee candidates using the paper forms available in the atrium or via the MLUC website. On our website homepage, scroll to the bottom and find recommendations for nominees to link you to the online form. Your participation in the search for candidates supports the future of MLUC. Our program for MLUC newcomers, UU 101, will meet next Sunday, November 27th at 11:15 in the Greeley Library, which is just across the courtyard here, just outside and to the left. Please join Madeline Seiko and Reverend Dave for an interactive primer on the UU faith, who we are, where we've come from, and how we can find our place in this community. We will share our spiritual journeys and listen to and learn from each other. The annual holiday workshop is coming up in 2 weeks on December 3rd from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., all here on the first floor. I hope everyone will attend. This all-ages event began early in the life of MLUC and has always been a fun and festive event. I can attest to it because I've been attending the workshop since I was 8 years old or so. And it's never stopped being fun for everybody. There are plenty of opportunities to help out. If you receive our weekly e-news, there's a link to a sign-up site to volunteer to help out. You can find more announcements in your order of service and on the bulletin board in the atrium. Now please take a moment to silence your electronic devices and join me in reciting our mission statement. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith. Thank you.
As you may have noticed, Reverend Dave is not here today. Jansen said, well, the cat's away. I didn't say it. Jansen did. No, I'm so excited to be here because Reverend Dave did ask me to plug for a couple of very special events that we have coming up. First and foremost, Thanksgiving dinner. We are having Thanksgiving dinner here at the church, and it's going to be at 4 p.m. on Thanksgiving. We do ask that you RSVP. We already have quite a crowd coming. We're very excited about it. I will be making my very special bougie green bean casserole. It does involve Gruyere, there's creme fraiche, would highly recommend you come try it. And I just wanted to plug this as an opportunity. If you don't want to see if you want to avoid your relatives on Thanksgiving, you have a church obligation. You know, it's so important. So just, you've got many options for coming on down on Thanksgiving. The other thing, as a heads up, is next Sunday, it is going to be bring a friend, bring some cookies, and or a poem written by someone else. So when you come on Sunday, bring a pal with you, bring some cookies with you. Maybe you have some left over from Thanksgiving. I'm not going to ask questions. Just bring those cookies. If you really want to bring a treat, bring some pie, but cookies are great. And bring a poem. Bring a favorite poem of yours. If you want to share that, we'll be reading them in the fireside room after the service on Sunday the 27th. So those are the two things I have to plug. And we're going to have a brief recognition of some past board members at this point. But again, we're giving you excuses to get out of Thanksgiving and spend time with us if you want it, and excuses to bring cookies and friends to church. It's going to be great. Come on down, Yasara.
Good morning. This week of Thanksgiving is a good time to complete the tributes to the rest of our ex-trustees. If you're keeping track, how many have I honored so far? 2. Yeah. Thank you, Eileen Andrews and Nini Ingersoll. And thank you, Caroline Bright, for these 10 minutes. I'd like to go off script a bit and express my gratitude to all the behind-the-scenes folks who give their time and are here after hours on weekends, during the week, and are not acknowledged. You all help to make this production possible. So I want to call out a tribute to you too. Yeah, thank you. Shout out to Biebendorf, who ran the bookstore for years by herself. How many people know who that is? 1. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your time and your efforts. Today, I'd like to give thanks for Anders Back and Jess Michael for their public service. Anders serves as secretary under Jess's board for 36 months. When Anders was at a meeting, you know there'd be detailed minutes. His minutes capture not just what was accomplished in a meeting, but also the tone of a particular month. There are many historical records in their own right. I still read them, Anders, and I appreciate your time. To the critics of this style, I say business practices are nice, but we are still a church. More importantly, Anders took this seriously. We knew that if he was in a meeting, there would be minutes, it would be shared, and would be made available. Thank you, Anders. Jess Michael, what else can I say about your ex-president that I didn't at the congregational meeting? A lot more, actually. Jess's 48 months of servitude began in 2018. Her tenure for 2 years as president began in 2020. Some would say before that. Every cycle has its own crises, and Jess's was to get us through a pandemic, an abrupt ministerial change, which brought us Reverend Messner, and subsequently Caroline Bright. She also rewrote the policies that were outdated by about a decade or so, and made a lot of progress in the staff board relationship in a positive way. Jess is your policy and governance expert. I am not. She can probably quote you any policy from memory, and more importantly, she knows how and when to apply them. Jess continues to serve the church through the SAFE congregational team made up of the minister, the senior minister, Dawn Starr, Jess Michael, and me. More on that later. Jess, I personally appreciate, I still do appreciate, your lightning speed computer processing brain. Very like Reverend Messner, these folks adapt quickly to any situation on the spot and are 10 steps ahead of you at any time. Thank you for leaving me with a clean plate, Jess. No imminent church crises to deal with. You left me in a good place in that regard. Thank you for trusting me with this role on behalf of the congregation. Please join me in thanking Jess Michael for her service as an ex-trustee and president of the board, and Anders Bach.
Good morning. On this Transgender Day of Remembrance, we light this chalice in righteous anger over the lives we have lost this past year. I will simply note that it is no coincidence that our week of awareness concludes with a day concerned with death, and state the obvious fact that it is beneath the dignity of a purportedly just society for any person to be murdered or mistreated because of their identity. And yet, year after year, we observe this day because the worldwide trans community sees more than our share of death. Let this light shine in honor of other beautiful lights that have been dimmed or extinguished, and let it serve as a reminder that God calls on us to care for the most vulnerable across the spectrum of oppressions, because the most vulnerable have the most need. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Dear, dear friends, this morning we gather, as we often do, with news that breaks our hearts. A shooting, another shooting. Though we are only just learning the details, we know that once again, a community already bearing the burden of fear and hatred and violence is struck again. In Colorado Springs, at Club Q, an LGBTQ gathering spot, people are dead. People are injured. People are forever changed. And this, on Transgender Day of Remembrance. This morning we gather, as we often do, with a brilliant sun lighting our way and a sense of possibility. The news from Egypt, where nations have been gathering to address our climate crisis, marks actual change. I will even dare say progress. UUSC partners, our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee partners, have for more than a decade been calling on global powers to recognize and acknowledge accountability and address the already devastating impacts of our thoughtless use of resources that has created this climate crisis. It's not a slam dunk, nothing is guaranteed, but the actions taken in Egypt last night mark a first step towards human rights and climate justice. Dear friends, this morning we gather, and it is so good to be together. For our call to worship this morning, I want to offer a poem by Rosemary Watola Tromer. It's entitled, For When People Ask. I want a word that means okay and not okay. More than that, a word that means devastated and stunned by joy. I want a word that says, I feel it all at once. The heart is not like a songbird, more like a Tuvan throat singer, able to sing both a drone and simultaneously 2 or 3 harmonics above it. A sound, the Tuvans say, that gives the impression of wind swirling among rocks. The heart understands swirl, how the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an insistent breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves, blesses us with paradox, so that we might walk more openly into this world so rife with devastation, this world so ripe with joy. Come, this is our world. May our being together bless it. And may our music and our singing be a reminder of the joy that abounds. Please stand in body or spirit.
This morning's Time for All Ages is Red, a Crayon Story by Michael Hall. He was red. Is he red? But he wasn't very good at it. Oh dear, says Olive. His teacher thought he needed more practice. I'll draw a red strawberry, and then you draw a red strawberry. You can do this, really. But he couldn't, really. Like this? Oh my, let's try again. His mother thought he needed to mix with other colors. Why don't you two go out and draw a nice round orange? Because what colors make orange? Who knows? Yellow and red, excellent. Yellow says a really big one. A really orange one. But they made a big greenish one. Yuck. Oops. His grandparents thought he wasn't warm enough. Your class is making self-portraits for Parents' Night. Wear this warm red scarf. Nice. It's so you. But it so wasn't. Oh dear me, says Silver. Everyone seemed to have something to say. Sometimes I wonder if he's really red at all. Don't be silly, it says red on his label. He came that way from the factory. Frankly, I don't think he's very bright. Well, I think he's lazy. Right, he's just got to press harder. Really apply himself. Give him time, he'll catch on. Of course he will. But he didn't catch on. Green drew a green frog. Black drew a black sheep. Brown drew a brown cow, and red, ack. All the art supplies wanted to help. The scissors thought his label was too tight. One snip should do it. The masking tape thought he was broken inside. This will help hold you together. I thought he wasn't sharp enough. Stay still now. But even with all our help and all his hard work, are those cherries red? Are those hearts red? Those are some blue foxes. He couldn't get the hang of it. One day, he met a new friend. Will you make a blue ocean for my boat? I can't. I'm red. Will you try? So he did. Thank you, it's perfect. You're welcome. It was easy. And he didn't stop there. Bluebirds, bluebells, blue jeans, blueberries, blue whale. I'm blue. He was blue, and everyone was talking. My son is brilliant. Who could have known he was blue? I always said he was blue. It was obvious. His blue ocean really lifted me. All of his work makes me so happy. His blue strawberries are my favorites. He's so intense. I'm going to make a green lizard with him, a really big one. I hear he's working on a huge new project. He's really reaching for the sky. And he really was. And that's the end of our story today. And what I think we should take away from this is just because someone is given a label, it doesn't reflect who they are on the inside. And that is the most important thing. When someone is really blue, they're blue no matter what. I now invite our kids to head to their classes.
The recipient of MLUC's November offering outreach is the Center for Positive Aging in Lower Merion. Since 1979, PALM, which is what it's called, PALM's mission is to assist adults 55 years of age and older to maintain a healthy, satisfying quality of life. They offer educational programs, creativity programs, health education, wellness activities, and social educational programs. PALM is an advocate for the unmet needs of older adults and is a repository of information about their rights, benefits, and opportunities. PALM programs support aging gracefully in community. Our gifts this morning will be used to purchase operating supplies. So your offering will now be gratefully received. If you prefer to make a non-cash donation, whether you're here or at home, you can follow the directions on the screen. In Candles of Community, we share our joys and sorrows. At the end of each announcement, would you say with me, we hold you in our hearts? Lilia Weber asks that we remember and memorialize those transgender and gender-expansive individuals lost to anti-transgender hatred and violence over the past year. And especially this morning, we mourn the loss of life in Colorado Springs at the LGBTQ club last night. 5 people were killed, 18 injured. For all lives taken by anti-trans hatred, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle in honor of the trans and non-binary people we know and love in our community. Their courage and presence are a blessing. We hold you in our hearts. And Pat Hennessy reports that the Hennessy family is having a baby boom. They're thrilled to welcome the most recent arrivals, Lily Thayer and Elizabeth Ella Doherty, and they are anxiously awaiting 2 more babies in December. For all the Hennessys, we hold you in our hearts. And for joys and sorrows too deep to share, we hold you in our hearts. For our reflection and reading today, I'm going to read the poem On the Fifth Day by Jane Hirschfield, and I'll read it twice so you have time to let it land in you, and then we'll have a minute of silence. On the fifth day. On the fifth day, the scientists who studied the rivers were forbidden to speak or to study the rivers. The scientists who studied the air were told not to speak of the air, and the ones who worked for the farmers were silenced, and the ones who worked for the bees. Someone from deep in the Badlands began posting facts. The facts were told not to speak and were taken away. The facts, surprised to be taken, were silent. Now it was only the rivers that spoke of the rivers, and only the wind that spoke of the bees, while the unpausing factual buds of the fruit trees continued to move toward their fruit. The silence spoke loudly of silence, and the rivers kept speaking of rivers, of boulders and air. Bound to gravity, earless and tongueless, the untested rivers kept speaking. Bus drivers, shelf stockers, code writers, machinists, accountants, lab techs, cellists kept speaking. They spoke the fifth day of silence. On the fifth day, the scientists who studied the rivers were forbidden to speak or to study the rivers. The scientists who studied the air were told to speak not of the air, and the ones who worked for the farmers were silenced, and the ones who worked for the bees. Someone from deep in the Badlands began posting facts. The facts were told not to speak and were taken away. The facts, surprised to be taken, were silent. Now it was only the rivers that spoke of the rivers, and only the wind that spoke of its bees. While the unpausing factual buds of the fruit trees continued to move toward their fruit. The silence spoke loudly of silence, and the rivers kept speaking of rivers, of boulders, of air. Bound to gravity, earless and tongueless, the untested rivers kept speaking. Bus drivers, shelf stockers, code writers, machinists, accountants, lab techs, cellists kept speaking. They spoke the fifth day of silence.
Thank you so much, choir. It is such a joy to be in a sanctuary filled with life and music, and to know that there are those among us online joining us as well. I am so grateful for this opportunity to be with you. I'm Katherine Morn. I'm the president of the Unitarian Universal Service Committee, and we at UUSC are so grateful for our partnership with Mainline that has lasted decades. I shared before this service with some folks who've engaged with us on our work in Haiti that we're doing really important work right now, and would love to share more after the service at our table. If you would like to learn more, you can also find more about our work today in Haiti on our website, in some of our blogs under news. Would love to keep you all up to date on that work in particular, since you've been such an important part of it. I'm here with my colleague Carly Cronin, who is in the back, and we will be at the table following the service. Many of you are very familiar with UUSC, but I know some of you aren't. So I'd like to ask, if you are a member of UUSC, would you raise your hand? Thank you. And those of you who are not and would like to learn more, I invite you to seek out these wonderful supporters of our important work. We're so grateful for your support and would love to welcome many more of you into this work that we share together, reflecting our values across the globe in our work for human rights. In early September, UUSC's head of programs, Rachel Freed, traveled to Hungary and Poland to meet with UUSC partners there who are responding to the needs of communities caught in the intersectional oppressions compounded by Putin's invasion and devastating attack on Ukraine. In alignment with UUSC's approach to responding in a time of crisis, we are supporting grassroots organizations that are serving communities too often tossed aside by government and international aid responses. In this case, our partners there are serving women in and from rural areas throughout Ukraine, LGBTQIA+ people who face threats not only in the war, but also from so-called humanitarian organizations, serving people with disabilities and non-ethnic Ukrainian people, often brown and black, who are not eligible for much of the support that is being offered to other communities. This is what we mean at UUSC when we say intersectional oppressions, compounding conditions that create layer upon layer of disadvantage and danger. Our partners in Poland and Hungary, in part, asked us for support to provide a brief time of rest and connection for feminist leaders who are facing unthinkable violence and trauma. My colleague Rachel shared on her return what an honor and joy it was for her to witness the care with which these leaders gathered together to ground themselves once more in the commitments of their activism, but also to rest for a time and to connect with each other in support and love. I begin with this small picture of a part of UUSC's work in our world in hopes that we might hold in our community care both the unthinkable losses that are happening every single day and the remarkable healing and hope that is born in courageous connection and in our commitments to justice. I also share this because it is not unlike what we strive to do together each time we gather for worship. Within the container of our faith community, we gather to rest from the relentless, pounding, sometimes real and sometimes manufactured demands of our days. We stop just for this hour. We are saying that taking time for connections and meaning-making and promise-making matters. In this way, we hold one another in the midst of unthinkable losses. In this way, we, each of us, find strength and courage and hope and faith for all that is possible, including justice and human rights for all. Today, on this Transgender Day of Remembrance, the meaning-making and promise-making work we do is held in the context of the most heartbreaking of losses, the brutal murders of people who are transgender. We stop today to remember, to pay tribute, to commit ourselves, and also to lift up and celebrate the beauty and dignity and power of trans people. As UUSC's partner Queer Detainee Empowerment Project, or QDEP, has shared with us, November 20th is not only a time to mourn, it is also a time for trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and other LGBTQIA+ people to take a breath and allow ourselves to celebrate being alive. Sometimes I have to admit, when I am describing UUSC's mission, it kind of catches as I'm saying the words. I falter a little on the bold proposition, which has been carried for over 80 years now, that we work together with partners in the US and around the world to dismantle systems that oppress and to advance human rights for all. I give thanks for the visionaries within UUSC and around the world who settle for nothing less in our mission. This is the sacred calling we are gathered to nurture today. I appreciate the opportunity to weave UUSC's story with mainline story and to share the role you all play in these global connections for healing and justice. One of the ways we describe our work, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, is as eye-to-eye partnership. In this expression of our theory for change, we demonstrate our belief that it is in relationships of radical trust and authentic connection that change is made possible. The power of this kind of authentic and transformative connection and action is present in many threads of progressive religious thought. One I want to lift up today comes from the Jewish academic, intellectual Martin Buber, who succinctly and vividly offers a model for healing connection in his notion of I and thou. He distinguishes authentic transformative connection from objectifying and extractive relationship, and he called that I and it. When I meet you as thou, I welcome you as subjective other, worthy and whole in your own right. When I meet you as it, I am preoccupied by what you are to me, and thereby unable to really see you at all. Relationship within this I-it framework is transactional, it's instrumental, it's extractive. I come to the relationship for the purpose of taking. I find this distinction so useful. We humans fail so often to meet people in this sacred, loving connection of I and thou, over and over again. Loving connection, meeting someone in the wholeness of their humanity, requires most of all that we know deep in ourselves our own wholeness and our own humanity, something we fail to remember so often. One of the gifts of faith community is that we come back together again and again to see each other whole, to remind each other that each of us is a precious gift. Community calls us back to the sacred loving connections and also to the work of repair for the harm that is done when we meet each other in extractive and transactional ways. While we have all experienced individual failure at this, which requires our spiritual work, it is the systemic failures of authentic connection that I want to speak about this morning. And here, it's important to remember that the biggest challenge we face is not one leader or one party or even one shooter that fails to recognize the human rights of some people. The biggest challenge we face is that the systems by which we organize our shared life, politically, economically, and socially, have been designed in no small part to keep us disconnected, to ensure that we forget our kinship, forget that we all have worth, and that we only thrive when we thrive together. As political theorist Brian Stout has written in his blog, Building Belonging, he writes, all domination systems, white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism, extractive capitalism, all domination systems depend on three things to maintain their power. First, that we disconnect from ourselves and our bodies. Next, that we disconnect from each other and community. And finally, that we disconnect from the earth and the other living beings that we share the earth with. All domination systems require us to be in this disconnecting relationship, maintaining I-it, instrumental, extractive relationships, rather than re-entering sacred and loving and authentic connection. And once we are disconnected and disengaged, we find ourselves, we resign ourselves, in fact, to being powerless, to shrugging at what we face, hopeless, despairing of anything possibly being different. And the fact is, when we are disconnected, we are powerless. This is what UUSC partner Pacific Island students fighting climate change are working against. They are indigenous youth and young adults whose homes and livelihoods and identities are at tremendous risk. Some of them are in immediate danger from rising water and self-water encroachment. Now, I'd love that picture again if we could. Thank you so much. They've been advocating for more proportionate response from global powers for more than a decade. This is a picture of them during the youth climate strike, remember 4 years ago or so. And this is their motto. We are not drowning, we are fighting. UUSC loves to say that we affirm not only the inherent worth and dignity of every person, but the power of every person as well. Now the Pacific Island students, thank you, have launched a new campaign, Born in Classroom Conversation, at a law school in the Solomon Islands, calling on the UN International Court of Justice to issue what is called an advisory opinion, ruling that the climate crisis is a human rights crisis. They like to say we want to take the world's biggest problem to the world's highest court. And what they're trying to do is to create a framework of accountability for the impacts that are happening on poor nations around the world because of the use of resources in rich and powerful nations. Essentially, the Pacific Island students are saying that by bringing a human rights lens to climate talks, we are meeting each other as thou, recognizing the wholeness and worth of all and challenging the transactional, extractive I and it systems that are allowing us to destroy our home. Another UUSC partner, FEM in Nicaragua, these three women are part of FEM, are building small, sustainable economies for women. They live in the midst of horrific violence against women, the destruction of their livelihoods, largely from North American extractive industries. And in the midst of all of this, they are taking small plots of land, teaching each other regenerative agriculture, and creating change and building healing connections with each other and with the planet. Around the world and with your support, UUSC works with partners to challenge the systems that force us into extractive relationships with each other and with our planet. In rejecting the cynical notion that there is no other way, FEM, QDEP, the Pacific students, and many others are building healing connection and regenerative economies so that all may flourish and thrive. I give thanks for their fierce and faithful work. The Pacific Island students, I love this photo, I want to share as well, call themselves not only fighters, but stubborn optimists. They, perhaps unlike us, do not have the privilege of slipping into despair. Their very lives depend on their fierce and faithful work. Together, we too can join them, seeing each other as whole and worthy, and knowing that nothing short of the flourishing and thriving of all is enough. This notion of thriving is woven throughout the writings of Robin Wall Kimmerer. Are some of you reading Braiding Sweetgrass, perhaps? Kimmerer uses her traditional wisdom and academic training as a botanist to show us the way nature models I and thou relationships. I especially appreciate an essay she's written on economies, on what she calls the gift economy. As she describes the regenerative power in the plant world through the example of a simple serviceberry bush, she reminds us that the only real thriving is mutual thriving, and that we owe each other and all of life a practice of loving connection, because all of this is gift. Nothing we have done entitles us to this life, to this planet, to each other. It's a gift. And so, when we hoard, when we objectify the giver or the gift, when we treat people as things or worse, when we commodify what cannot be owned, and when we make of the gift a private asset, we squash the regenerative nature of life itself. We make violence inevitable, and we risk losing all of it, because this is the inevitable consequence of our objectifying of each other and life and the planet. So many of the systems that order our lives politically, economically, and socially are powered by racism, by patriarchy, by extractive capitalism. Our faith, grounded in the inherent worth and dignity and power of all, calls us every day, every week, to find ways, large and small, to reject these systems and create new ones. Faithfully, fiercely, like the people we learn about from around the world who will not stop in building these healing connections for the sake of the flourishing of all. Thank you so much for your support of UUSC's bold mission. Every day we wake to some new glimpse of our world, which is rife with devastation. May we hold each other tenderly in this truth and commit ourselves again to our part in mutual healing connections for justice. And may we also attend to and hold as precious our world that is ripe with joy and beauty. And today, may we do at least one thing to show our faith and our love for each other and for this world, bringing our own gifts and blessings to create more beauty and more justice. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and sing fiercely and faithfully and with hope. The heart understands swirl, how the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an insistent breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves, blesses us with paradox, so we might more openly walk into this world so rife with devastation, so ripe with beauty. Friends, openly, lovingly, may we go in peace.